The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched far above Kang Wu's head. The human ambassador stood alone in the center of the massive chamber, looking small beneath the towering walls of crystal and metal. Around him, representatives from 12 different alien species watched from their elevated platforms. Their eyes, tentacles, and various sensory organs all focused on him with cold attention. Kang Wu had been Earth's voice in the galaxy for 15 years. He had seen many trials in this chamber, but never one like this. Today, humanity itself was on trial. High Counselor Velthari spoke first. The tall, crystalline being's voice rang out clear and sharp through the translation system. Ambassador, Kang Wu of the Human Federation. Your species stands accused of crimes against galactic peace. The charges came one by one, each more absurd than the last. Humanity was too aggressive. They expanded too fast. They won battles too easily. They asked too many questions. They solved problems without permission. Park Sun watched from the gallery, her hands clenched tight in her lap. As humanity's top scientist, she had worked with many of these species. She had helped them solve diseases, design better ships, and understand new technologies. Now they called that cooperation dangerous, interference. The human species has shown a pattern of disruptive behavior, continued Counselor Thexera of the Morvani. The slug-like being's words dripped with disgust. They colonize worlds we deemed uninhabitable. They defeat enemies we thought unbeatable. They make other species question our guidance. Captain Li Dong sat in the military section, his uniform pressed and perfect. He had led the human fleet that destroyed the Rakathi pirates just 6 months ago. The raid was supposed to take years of careful planning. Instead, human ships had ended the threat in 3 months. Apparently, being too effective was now a crime. The evidence against humanity filled the air with holographic displays. Star maps showed human colonies and systems the Council had marked as impossible to settle. Battle reports detailed human victories that were statistically improbable. Trade records showed human merchants finding profitable routes through uncrossable space. Dr. Choi Hana listened to each accusation with growing anger. She had spent her life making dead worlds livable. Her terraforming technology had created homes for billions of people. Now the Council called her life's work unauthorized environmental manipulation. The humans teach other species to resist our wisdom, declared Counselor Zethkor of the Kethrin. The insect-like hive mind spoke in perfect unison through a dozen mouths. The Deltari no longer accept our mining quotas. The Kalani question our trade agreements. The humans spread their rebellious ideas like a disease. Ambassador Kang Wu finally spoke. His voice was calm but carried clearly through the chamber. Counselors, humanity has done nothing but exist. We colonize worlds you cannot use. We fight enemies you cannot defeat. We trade in regions you cannot reach. How is this a crime? High Counselor Velthari's crystal body flashed with angry light. You exist too well, human. Your species adapts too quickly. You solve problems too easily. You make the galaxy unstable. The trial continued for hours. Each council species presented evidence of human crimes. The Zentani complained that humans had figured out faster than light travel without asking permission. The Yulani were angry that humans had developed new weapons without sharing the designs. The Meraki hated that human diplomats had ended 3 wars before the Council could intervene. Park Sun wanted to scream. Every crime was actually an achievement. Humanity had made the galaxy safer, richer, and more peaceful. Their reward was exile. The most damaging testimony came from the Council's military advisors. General Crix of the Enforcement Fleet presented detailed analysis of human warfare. Humans do not fight like civilized species, he declared. They use unpredictable tactics. They adapt in the middle of battle. They turn defeats into victories. They make our military planning impossible. Captain Li Dong almost laughed at that. Of course humans adapted in battle. That was how you stayed alive. That was how you won. Apparently the Council preferred enemies who followed predictable patterns and lost on schedule. The economic testimony was equally absurd. Human traders were accused of finding profits where the Council said none existed. Human colonies were charged with growing food in impossible conditions. Human manufacturers faced criticism for making better products than established galactic companies. Dr. Choi Hana realized the real problem. The Council did not want equality. They wanted control. Humanity's success proved that their guidance was not necessary. Other species were starting to notice. As the day wore on, the verdict became clear. Every council member would vote for exile. They had already decided before the trial began. This was not justice. This was elimination of a threat to their power. The final speaker was Counselor Yulthani of the ancient Yulani race. The energy being's words carried the weight of 10,000 years of galactic leadership. The human species represents chaos. They succeed where we predict failure. They thrive where we expect death. They inspire hope where we counsel acceptance. This cannot continue. Ambassador Kang Wu listened to the closing arguments with growing understanding. The council was not afraid of human aggression. They were terrified of human potential. They saw what humanity might become if left unchecked. They saw a future where their authority was questioned by every species in the galaxy. The vote was quick and unanimous. 12 species. 12 votes for exile. Humanity would be moved to the void sector, a region of dead stars and broken worlds at the edge of the galaxy. No ships would be allowed to leave. No trade would be permitted. Humanity would be cut off from galactic civilization forever. High Counselor Velthari read the sentence with obvious satisfaction. The human species will be relocated to the void sector within 18 months. All human assets in council space will be confiscated. All human citizens will be transported to their new home. This is the will of the Galactic Council, the chamber erupted in alien cheers and celebration. Humanity's exile was cause for galaxy-wide joy. Ambassador Kang Wu stood quietly as the noise washed over him. Then he spoke his final words as humanity's representative to the Galactic Council. Counselors, you believe you are solving a problem, but you may find that removing us from the galaxy is easier than living without us. The crystal being's laughter rang through the chamber. We will manage perfectly well without human interference, Ambassador, perhaps better than we have in centuries. Kang Wu smiled for the first time that day. It was not a pleasant expression. We shall see, High Counselor. We shall see. The last human transport ship crossed the barrier into the void sector exactly 18 months after the Council's verdict. General Kim Tae watched from the bridge of the flagship as the energy barrier sealed shut behind them. 40 billion humans were now cut off from the rest of the galaxy forever. The void sector earned its name honestly. Dead stars cast pale light on frozen worlds. Space itself seemed twisted here, making normal, faster-than-light travel impossible. The Council had chosen humanity's prison well. It was a place where civilized species came to die. Kim Tae studied the sensor readings with grim satisfaction. The Council expected humans to wither away in this cosmic wasteland. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The first challenge came immediately. The massive human fleet needed somewhere to land, but every world in the sector was supposedly uninhabitable. Dr. Choi Hana had different ideas. She led her terraforming teams to Kepler 4042c, a frozen ball of rock orbiting a dying red dwarf star. The Council calls this world dead, she told her engineers as they surveyed the icy surface. I call it sleeping. Within weeks, human machines began their work. Atmospheric processors melted the ice and released trapped gases. Solar collectors gathered the weak starlight and amplified it. Greenhouse domes sprouted across the landscape like flowers after rain. The work was hard and dangerous. 3 engineers died when a methane pocket exploded. A storm destroyed 2 weeks of construction. Equipment failures left teams stranded on the surface for days. But humans had always thrived on hard work. Each setback became a lesson. Each failure led to better designs. Each death strengthened their resolve. Min led the mining operations that dug deep into the planet's core. The Council sees worthless rock, he told his crews. We see raw materials. His teams found rare metals that the galaxy's scientists said could not exist. They discovered energy crystals that powered their machines for months without replacement. Meanwhile, Dr. Nam Ki worked on the sector's greatest puzzle. The space anomalies that made normal FTL travel impossible were not barriers. They were highways, if you knew how to read them. The Council's ships fight against these currents, she explained to her research team. We will learn to ride them. Her breakthrough came on a cold night when exhaustion made her see patterns others had missed. The spatial distortions were not random. They followed rules that human mathematics could understand. Within months, the first human ships were jumping between star systems using paths the Council thought impassable. Captain Yoon Jae established humanity's new military doctrine during this time. With no galactic law to worry about, humans could fight however they chose. He studied every human defeat in history and learned from each mistake. We are no longer bound by their rules, he told his officers. We can become something they have never seen. Human shipyards worked around the clock building new vessels. These were not copies of Council designs. They were something entirely new, faster, stronger, and built for the unique conditions of the void sector. Yang So organized the economic miracle that made it all possible. Cut off from galactic trade, humanity had to become completely self-sufficient. She created supply networks that connected every human colony. Nothing was wasted, everything was shared. The Council thought isolation would weaken us, she told her economic advisors. Instead, it has made us stronger. Human colonies spread throughout the void sector at an incredible pace. Each new world became a laboratory for survival. Desert. Planets taught humans to conserve water. Ice worlds showed them new forms of energy generation. Gas giants revealed the secrets of atmospheric manipulation. Children born in exile never saw the galaxy beyond the barriers. But they did not feel deprived. They grew up in a civilization that was purely human, free from alien influence or control. These children would become something the galaxy had never imagined. The second year brought the first major crisis. Food shortages threatened several colonies when supply ships were lost in a spatial storm. Traditional thinking said the colonies would have to be abandoned. Human thinking was different. Engineer Park Min developed hydroponic systems that could grow food anywhere. Biologist Lee Na created new crop strains that thrived in artificial environments. Within months, the hungry colonies were producing surplus food. Communication across the sector was another challenge. The spatial distortions that allowed FTL travel also disrupted normal radio signals. Humans adapted by creating quantum communication networks that worked through the distortions rather than around them. By the third year, something unprecedented happened. The human population in the void sector began to grow. Not through immigration, which was impossible, but through natural increase. Couples were having children, families were growing. Hope was taking root in the cosmic wasteland. The Council had expected human civilization to collapse within 5 years. Instead, it was flourishing in ways they could not have imagined. Dr. Choi Hana stood on the observation deck of New Seoul Station, watching ships arrive from a dozen human colonies. The stars of the void sector no longer looked dead to her. They looked like home. They wanted us gone, she said to her assistant. They have no idea what they have created. The transformation was visible everywhere. Human technology was advancing at incredible speed, freed from the need to follow galactic standards. Human society was evolving in directions that pure isolation made possible. Human ambition was unleashed without limits or restrictions. General Kim Tae received reports from across the sector that filled him with quiet pride. Humanity was not just surviving exile, they were thriving in it. They were becoming something new. The Council had succeeded in their goal of removing humans from galactic civilization, but they had also succeeded in creating something they would never have expected, a human civilization that no longer needed the galaxy's approval to exist. On the 5th anniversary of exile, Ambassador Kang Woo spoke at the memorial ceremony for those who had died during the evacuation. His words were broadcast to every human colony in the void sector. The Council wanted to teach us our place, he said. Instead, they taught us that we can make our own place anywhere we choose. The audience cheered, but Kang Woo's smile held secrets the galaxy was not ready to learn. Humanity was no longer the species that had been exiled 5 years ago. They were something new, something dangerous, and something the Council could never have predicted. The Void Sector was no longer a prison. It had become humanity's forge where they were being shaped into something the galaxy had never seen before. 5 years after humanity's exile, Counselor Thexara of the Morvani faced a problem she had never imagined. The morning reports from across the galaxy painted a picture of growing chaos that made no sense. Trade Route 7, which had operated smoothly for 3,000 years, was experiencing technical difficulties. Pirates were attacking merchant ships in systems that had been peaceful since the formation of the Council. Most troubling of all, the Deltari had refused their mining quotas for the 3rd month running. Thexara slid her massive slug-like body through the corridors of the Council complex, leaving a trail of worried secretaries in her wake. Something was wrong with the galaxy, and she could not understand what. The emergency session that followed would become known as the first sign of the coming crisis. Representatives from all 12 Council species gathered to discuss problems that seemed to have no connection to each other. Councillor Velthari reported communication breakdowns between the Zentani crystal colonies. "Our quantum networks are failing," the crystalline being admitted with obvious shame. "We cannot maintain contact with our outer settlements." Admiral Crix of the Enforcement Fleet brought even worse news. "Pirate activity has increased by 300% in the past year," he reported. "Raiders are hitting targets we thought were completely secure. It's as if they know exactly where our defenses are weakest." The reports continued around the table. The Yulani energy beings were struggling with power distribution across their empire. The Kethran hive minds were having trouble coordinating their scattered colonies. The Meraki gas dwellers could not maintain their atmospheric processing plants. What none of them wanted to admit was the common thread running through every crisis. For 10,000 years, these problems had been solved by human consultants, human engineers, and human advisors. Now the humans were gone. Dr. Velthani of the Zentani Science Consortium faced her own nightmare in the research labs of Prima Station. A plague was affecting the crystal formations that made up her people's bodies. The disease caused fractures in their molecular structure that led to slow, painful death. She had been working on the problem for months, with no success. The solution required a type of quantum biochemistry that her people had never fully mastered. They had always relied on human scientists to handle that kind of research. The human research facilities that could have helped were now sealed beyond the void sector barrier. The human databases that contained the cure were no longer accessible. The human colleagues who understood the problem were no longer available. Dr. Velthani stared at her failing experiments and realized with growing horror that her people might be facing extinction simply because they no longer had access to human knowledge. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On Morvac Prime, the slug-like Morvani struggled to maintain their atmospheric processors without human technical support. The machines were breaking down faster than they could be repaired. In the Kalani system, the proud warrior species found their defense networks failing against increasingly bold pirate attacks. The sophisticated early warning systems had been designed by human military advisors who were no longer available for maintenance or upgrades. The Rakathi pirates, supposedly defeated by human forces years earlier, were back in greater numbers than ever. Worse, they seemed to know everything about galactic defense strategies. Their attacks targeted exactly the right systems at exactly the right times. Admiral Crick spent sleepless nights studying the pattern of raids. The pirates were not randomly violent. They were surgically precise, hitting targets that would cause maximum disruption with minimum risk. It was the kind of strategic thinking that human military advisors had specialized in. The terrible irony was not lost on him. Humans had taught galactic species how to fight effectively. Now someone was using those lessons against the galaxy itself. Trade Commissioner Yelkan of the Zentani faced collapse of the economic systems that had supported galactic civilization for millennia. The complex web of interstellar commerce was failing in ways that made no sense. Supply chains that had worked perfectly for centuries were breaking down. Trade routes were becoming unprofitable for reasons no one could explain. Currency exchange, Rates were fluctuating wildly without apparent cause. The problem was invisible but devastating. For thousands of years, human economists had maintained the delicate balance that kept galactic trade functioning. They had written the algorithms that managed currency exchanges. They had designed the logistics networks that moved goods between star systems. Now those systems were running on autopilot, slowly degrading without human maintenance. The galaxy's economy was dying by degrees, and no one understood why. On Kethros, the hive mind capital, billions of insect-like beings struggled with coordination problems they had never experienced. The vast collective consciousness that made their civilization possible was developing gaps and blind spots. The issue was not biological. The Kethran hive minds were as strong as ever. The problem was technological. The communication networks that linked their scattered colonies had been optimized by human systems engineers over many decades. Without human maintenance, the networks were slowly losing efficiency. Information that should have traveled instantly between worlds now took hours or days to arrive. Decision-making that should have been instantaneous was becoming sluggish and confused. Queen Cathara felt her empire slowly losing coherence as communication delays mounted. Her people faced the terrifying prospect of their hive minds fragmenting into isolated groups that could not coordinate with each other. The crisis deepened as the 5th year ended and the 6th began. Systems that had worked for millennia were failing simultaneously across the galaxy. The common cause was becoming impossible to ignore, even as council leaders refused to admit it publicly. High Counselor Velthari called another emergency session as reports flooded in from every sector of council space. The agenda was simple, but terrifying. The galaxy was falling apart and no one knew how to fix it. "We are facing simultaneous system failures across multiple sectors," she announced to the assembled council. "Our experts cannot explain the pattern or predict what will fail next." The truth was simpler than they wanted to admit. The galaxy was discovering what it meant to live without human problem-solving ability. Every crisis they faced had been solved before by human ingenuity. Every system that was failing had been maintained by human expertise. Counselor Thexara finally spoke the words that everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say. Could these problems be related to the absence of human involvement? The silence that followed was deafening. 12 proud species faced the possibility that they had exiled the very beings who made their civilization possible. The galaxy had achieved its goal of removing human interference from their affairs. Now they were learning what their affairs looked like without human solutions to keep them running smoothly. In the depths of space, beyond the barrier that sealed the void sector, 40 billion humans continued building their new civilization. They had no knowledge of the chaos spreading through the galaxy they had been forced to leave. They were too busy creating the future to worry about the past they had lost. 7 years after the exile, Ambassador Velthari made a journey no council member had attempted since the barrier was established. Her crystalline form shimmered with nervous energy as her ship approached the edge of the void sector. The galaxy was dying slowly, and the council finally understood why. Every system failure, every economic collapse, every military defeat could be traced to the absence of human expertise. Velthari's mission was simple but humiliating. Beg the humans for help. What she found at the border shattered every assumption the council had made about humanity's fate. The empty space around the barrier hummed with activity that defied all predictions. Massive industrial platforms hung in the darkness like metal cities. Ships moved between them in organized formations that spoke of efficiency and purpose. Energy readings indicated construction on a scale that dwarfed anything in council space. "Unknown vessel, state your business," came a crisp voice over the communication system. The words were spoken in perfect galactic standard, but with a confidence that made Velthari's crystal structure vibrate with unease. "This is Ambassador Velthari of the Galactic Council," she replied. "I request an audience with human leadership." The pause that followed felt longer than it probably was. When the voice returned, it carried a hint of amusement. "Ambassador, you are entering human space. Please follow the navigation beacon to docking platform 7. Captain Ryuhan will meet with you." The journey to the platform took her through a maze of human construction that grew more impressive with each kilometer. Manufacturing stations the size of moons processed raw materials at incredible speed. Defense platforms bristled with weapons that looked nothing like Council designs. Most shocking of all were the ships. Human vessels moved with a grace that made Council dreadnoughts look clumsy by comparison. They were sleek where galactic ships were bulky, elegant where others were crude. These were not the desperate survivors the Council had imagined. These were the products of a civilization that had found its own path. Captain Ryu Han greeted her in a docking bay that could have held a dozen Council flagships. He was younger than she expected, probably born after the exile began. His uniform was simple but perfectly fitted. His manner was polite but showed no trace of subservience. "Ambassador," he said with a slight bow. "Welcome to the new Terra platform. What can humanity do for you today?" The question was casual, but Velthari heard the confidence behind it. This was not a desperate exile begging for readmission to galactic society. This was an equal offering to help from a position of strength. The conversation that followed revealed the true scope of humanity's transformation. Captain Ryu led her through corridors lined with displays showing human achievements that seemed impossible. "Population statistics," he said, gesturing to a holographic chart. "We now have 120 billion citizens across 400 settled worlds. Growth rate is approximately 8% annually." Velthari's crystal body flashed with shock. The human population had tripled during their exile. The void sector, which should have been humanity's graveyard, had become their nursery. Dr. Bei Young appeared as a hologram to brief the ambassador on technological developments. The elderly scientist had been a junior researcher during the original trial. Now she spoke with the authority of someone who had helped reshape human civilization. "Energy systems tap directly into stellar cores," she explained while data streams flowed around them. "We can extract more power from a dying red dwarf than Council species generate from healthy stars. Our terraforming techniques can create garden worlds from gas giants. Our manufacturing processes use raw materials that Council science considers impossible to work with." The display showed human colonies thriving on worlds the Council had surveyed and rejected as uninhabitable. Desert planets bloomed with green vegetation. Ice worlds bustled with underground cities that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Gas giants supported floating settlements that housed millions of people. Shin Ai, now Director of Human Colonial Affairs, appeared next to explain the political transformation. "The exile forced us to create new forms of government," she said. "We are no longer bound by galactic political traditions. Our system is designed purely for human needs and human values." The Human Federal Republic, as they called themselves, was unlike anything in galactic civilization. It combined democratic representation with technocratic expertise. Leaders were chosen for competence rather than political connections. Policies were based on evidence rather than tradition. Most disturbing to Velthari was the military briefing delivered by Admiral Ko Jun of the Human Defense Force. The weapons and tactics he described were revolutionary in ways that made Council military doctrine obsolete. "We developed new forms of faster-than-light travel that work better in regions Council species consider impassable," he explained. "Our ships can appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours rather than weeks. Our weapons use principles that Council physics says are impossible." The Admiral was careful not to reveal specific details, but the implications were clear. Humanity now possessed military technology that could challenge any force in the galaxy. Their exile had not weakened them. It had forced them to become stronger than any Council species had imagined possible. The economic briefing was equally stunning. Yang So, now Minister of Interstellar Commerce, presented trade figures that defied galactic economic theory. "Complete self-sufficiency was achieved in year 4, she reported. "We now produce surplus goods in every major category. Our manufacturing output per capita exceeds Council averages by a factor of 3. Our research and development spending is larger than the total scientific budgets of all Council species combined." Velthari realized with growing horror that humanity had not simply survived their exile. They had used it as an opportunity to build something far superior to Council civilization. The tour continued for hours, each revelation more shocking than the last. Human medical technology that could extend lifespans indefinitely. Human educational systems that produced genius-level intellects as a matter of routine. Human art and culture that had evolved in directions no galactic species had imagined. "You wanted us gone," Admiral Kojun observed as the briefing concluded. "We obliged, but you never asked what we might become in isolation." The final revelation came when Captain Ryuhan brought Velthari to an observation deck that looked out over the human fleet. Thousands of ships stretched beyond the horizon, each one representing technology that surpassed anything in Council. "Space. Ambassador," the captain said quietly. "Why are you really here?" Velthari's crystal form dimmed with shame as she explained the chaos spreading through galactic civilization. System failures, economic collapse, military defeats, social unrest. The galaxy was falling apart without human expertise to hold it together. "We need your help," she admitted. "The Council was wrong to exile humanity. We realize that now." "Captain," Ryuhan nodded thoughtfully. "Help is possible," he said, "but understand that we are no longer the species you exiled 7 years ago. We have grown beyond the need for Council approval or recognition. Any assistance we provide will be between equals." As Velthari's ship departed the human border region, she carried with her a message that would transform galactic politics forever. Humanity had not only survived their exile, they had used it to become the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. The Council had succeeded in creating a galaxy without humans. Now they faced the prospect of learning to live in a galaxy where humans no longer needed them. The balance of power had shifted forever, and the species that had once judged humanity unworthy were about to discover what it meant to negotiate from a position of weakness. 10 years after humanity's exile, the Galactic Council chambers looked very different. Where once alien representatives had sat in judgment of human actions, now those same beings found themselves in the position of supplicants, begging for human. At High Counselor Thexara stood where Ambassador Kang Wu had once faced trial. Her massive slug-like form trembled with humiliation as she spoke words that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. "We made an error," she admitted to the assembled human delegation. "The galaxy requires human expertise. We formally request the restoration of human participation in galactic affairs." President Li Su of the Human Federal Republic listened from her position at the head of the human delegation. She had been a junior diplomat during the original trial, watching in silence as her species was condemned to exile. Now she represented a civilization that had transcended the Council's ability to control or contain. The changes in the galaxy were visible everywhere. The Rakathi Confederacy had conquered 6 star systems while Council forces proved unable to mount effective resistance. The great trade routes had collapsed, leaving entire sectors economically isolated. 3 Council member species faced extinction-level crises that their own technology could not solve. "Your request is acknowledged," President Li Su replied with diplomatic politeness that carried no warmth. "However, the human government must consider the terms under which such assistance might be provided." The human delegation was impressive, in ways that made the Council members uncomfortable. Every representative was younger than 40, born and raised in the Void sector. They carried themselves with the confidence of a species that had never known defeat or compromise. Admiral Park Ji of the Human Defense Force spoke next, his words cutting through the Council's assumptions like a blade through paper. "You feared us when we were bound by your laws," he observed. "Now you need us, and we are bound by nothing but our own conscience." The military situation was desperate and getting worse. Human intelligence networks, dissolved during the exile, had left. The Council blind to emerging threats. Human strategic doctrine, dismissed as too aggressive, was now desperately needed to counter enemies who had learned from human military advisors. Dr. Nam, so humanity's chief xenobiologist, presented the Council with solutions to every crisis currently plaguing galactic civilization. Her presentation was clinical, professional, and utterly devastating in its implications. "The Zentani crystal plague can be cured using quantum biochemistry techniques developed in our research facilities," she reported. "The Morvani atmospheric processors can be repaired with manufacturing processes we perfected in year 6 of exile. The colony defense networks can be upgraded using military technology we consider routine. Each solution came with a price that made the council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Humanity would help, but only as equals. No more junior partnership, no more second-class status, no more restrictions on human expansion or development. The debate that followed revealed the full scope of the transformation that had taken place during the decade of exile. Humanity was no longer a species seeking acceptance from galactic civilization. They had become a galactic civilization unto themselves. Trade Minister Yang So presented economic data that reduced several council members to stunned silence. Human manufacturing capacity now exceeds the combined output of all council species, she reported matter-of-factly. Our scientific research spending is larger than the total education budgets of the galaxy's 3 most advanced civilizations. The numbers were devastating. While council species had stagnated during the decade without human expertise, humanity had experienced explosive growth in every measurable category: population, technology, military capability, economic output. Humans now led in every area that mattered. "You are no longer indispensable," Councillor Velthari protested with crystalline desperation. "We can solve our own problems given time." President Li Su's smile was polite, but held no mercy. "Time is exactly what you do not have, Councillor. The Rakathi will control 10 more systems within the year. The Crystal Plague will kill half your population within 2 years. Your economic collapse will cause famine on 60 worlds within 18 months. The human analysis was precise, devastating, and absolutely accurate. The Council had gambled that they could survive without human assistance. They had lost that gamble so completely that survival now depended on human mercy. Admiral Park Ji delivered the military assessment that sealed the Council's fate. "Your defense networks are 15 years behind current human technology. Your tactical doctrine is obsolete. Your strategic planning is compromised by political considerations that we abandoned long ago." The subtext was clear. If humanity chose to become hostile rather than helpful, the Council would face military defeat. Within months, the species that had once exiled humans for being too dangerous now found themselves completely at human mercy. The final blow came from Dr. Choi Hana, now Director of Human Terraforming Operations. Her presentation showed human colonies spreading through regions of space the Council had never even explored. "We have established settlements in 14 previously unknown star systems," she reported. "Our exploration fleets have mapped regions of space that Council science declared impossible to reach. We are no longer confined to the void sector, or even to Council space." The implications were staggering. Humanity was expanding beyond the known galaxy itself. They were discovering new worlds, new resources, new possibilities that the Council had never imagined. Exile had not contained them. It had launched them toward a future that dwarfed galactic civilization. The negotiations that followed lasted for weeks. Some Council species, proud and ancient, refused to accept humanity's new status. The Yolani energy beings declared that they would never bow to a young species barely 10,000 years old. Others, facing immediate extinction, had no choice but to accept human terms. The Zentani agreed to full human equality in exchange for the cure to their crystal plague. The Morvani accepted human technological superiority in return for atmospheric processing assistance. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than the Maibu original exile decision. 7 species voted to accept humanity's terms. 5 voted to reject them and face the consequences alone. President Li Su signed the new Galactic Charter that established humanity as an equal member of the galactic community. But equality was no longer enough. The humans had grown beyond the need for Council membership. They were now a power that the Council needed more than they needed the Council. This agreement establishes formal diplomatic relations between the Human Federal Republic and the Galactic Council, she announced. "We look forward to a future of mutual cooperation between sovereign equals." The words were diplomatic, but their meaning was revolutionary. The Council was no longer the supreme authority in the galaxy. They were now one power among many, forced to negotiate with humans as equals, rather than dictate to them as subjects. Ambassador Kang Wu, now in his 80s but still sharp, attended the signing ceremony as humanity's senior diplomatic advisor. The same chamber where he had once stood accused now hosted the ceremony that marked humanity's emergence as a galactic great power. As he watched President Lee Su sign the charter that ended humanity's exile, he remembered his words from 10 years earlier. You may find that removing us from the galaxy is easier than living without us. The galaxy had learned that lesson through a decade of crisis and decline. Humanity had taught it by doing something far more powerful than conquest or revenge. They had taught it by building a civilization so successful that it could not be ignored, so advanced that it could not be opposed, and so necessary that it could not be rejected. The Council had succeeded in creating a galaxy without humans, but that galaxy had proven unable to function without human expertise. Now they faced a new reality, a galaxy where humans were not subjects seeking approval, but equals offering assistance from a position of unassailable strength. The age of human exile was over. The age of human leadership had begun.